Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I'd like to address what's probably the most common question I get asked on a regular basis on the channel, which is, Nick, what's the best budget-focused everyday carry knife? As many of you may suspect, there is no one right answer for every human, right? It's not like I can say, oh, this one, case closed. Instead, every person is going to have different needs. They're going to have different requirements. They're going to have different aesthetic desires, etc. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to focus on showing off some of the pieces that I recommend most regularly to people out there in the world, and then let you all kind of decide from there. And you know, do the research yourself. A couple of disclaimers before we go any further. To start with, prices are current as of August 2020. I'm sure they'll go up in the future, but that's where we're at the moment. Next thing, I'm going to be giving more in the way of basics than you'll find in a normal review, talking about, oh, liner lock versus frame lock, etc. So there's that. And by the way, do watch the full review. If you're curious about any of these pieces, go ahead and watch the full review, because I'll give more details there. I'll get deeper into it, and, you know, talk more about the good, the great, the bad, and the ugly of all of these pieces on the table here. But there you go. And then in terms of what's selected on the table here, a couple of limitations. To start with, it needs to be in mass production and not discontinued. That's an important detail there. It needs to be from a brand that is kind to the community, interacting positively both with their fans and with the review community. It needs to be from brands that have a proper U.S. supply chain, being available through at least a couple of major retailers. And by the way, it is important as you're looking at these things, if you're thinking, oh, I should buy one of these, support a local retailer, support a dedicated knife shop. Either find a local shop in your area or go to one online. But you can get a lot of these guys through mega retailers, but let's support small businesses where we can. It makes the world a better place. Then finally, I'm only looking at brands that produce only original designs. There are lots of brands out there that have a bunch of either clones or homages and things like that, and I'm not going there. I don't want to support those folks, and I don't think you should either. But nonetheless, that's what I'm talking about here. Those are the kinds of brands I'll be discussing. And if your favorite knife didn't show up on this list, let me know down in the comments what it was. You know, make an argument, right? Tell people out there that it's out there. So, anyways, finally though, before I go into it, I want to make one quick note on the dropship brands. Because I know that if I don't, the comments are going to be full of people wondering why I didn't mention the Crinkle Fleep 8675309 that they picked up on eBay last week. That is just amazing. Look, I'm aware of these things, right? There are brands who do almost all of their business on overseas direct-to-consumer marketplace sites, or maybe eBay or Amazon. These are brands with little to no distribution or warranty infrastructure, at least here in the US. And look, there are hundreds of these companies, some that last for just days, right? Like, oh, I only saw that name once. And some that have stuck around for a while, that have developed some reputations, good and bad, right? But these companies specialize in knives which on paper are offering amazing value. They claim high-end steels and construction at prices that are damn near unbelievable, right? And sometimes they do actually deliver that. But the problem is there are some pitfalls that show up here, because very often these brands are selling clones of existing designs, which is just not something we should support as a community. Very often the steels aren't what's advertised. They'll say, oh, it's Van-X, when in reality, no, it's certainly not. Or maybe they cut corners with heat treat, leading to poor performance. So you got to watch out for that. And of course, quality can be a little bit hit or miss with really no support to speak of. There are definitely collectors out there who love rooting around in the bargain bin, so to speak, who know full well what they're getting into and enjoy the thrill of the chase. And absolutely, if you roll those dice often enough, you can absolutely win. But there's just not enough consistency in quality of branding for me to be able to recommend any of that world. So even though there are bargains to be found in that side of the world, and many of you may enjoy playing that game, I'm not going there, and I generally don't steer folks who are brand new to the knife market into that part of the world, so to speak. Call it caution, call it bias, I just wanted to be upfront about it. So anyways, let's go ahead and jump into some of the pieces that I do recommend, and that I think you should absolutely consider if you're looking for a great budget pocket knife. And actually, one other thing to mention is the price point that I've chosen as the cutoff for this is $60 US. Of course, they could be more or less in the future, and more or less depending on where you live in the world, but nonetheless, that's what I'm using. And the reason I chose that point, it's arbitrary, but that seems like a price that for most people is something that, even if you can't do it immediately, is something you can save up to and do without really hurting your lifestyle too badly. Seems like a good cutoff and doesn't get too bougie, but also doesn't keep us in the area of like, these pieces are okay. So the $60 $60 is the highest end here. But we're going to go ahead and start off with the Buck 110. The Buck 110 is a standard, and in fact, it is the only American-made knife on this list here today, just because there really aren't a lot of American-made pocket knives in this budget area. That's just the thing there. So if that matters to you, although quality is about effort, not geography, if that matters to you, this is going to be your choice here. But this is a piece that is a classic. It is a standard, and for a lot of people, it's sort of the beginning and the end of their pocket knife world. It's not a super practical pocket carry choice. You don't just toss this in your pocket. It doesn't have a clip or anything like that, and it's super heavy, but it has a lot of nice features. It is a locking knife with a back lock, although in this case, some people call it a tail lock because you unlock it in the back there. But nonetheless, it is a very nice piece, and it is absolutely a good tool that has served many people very well for many, many years. Next up is a knife that I don't have on the table at the moment, actually two that I don't have on the table, and by the way, I'm doing this roughly alphabetically, but the CJRB Ria. So CJRB is a company that is affiliated with Artisan Cutlery and does their budget end. The Ria, R-I-A, is $35 to $65, depending on the steel, depending on the scales, etc. I don't have one on the table at the moment, but it is a very nice little knife and offers something that is relatively small and very compelling. Same thing with the CJRB Feldspar. There is a large and a small variant. They're $35 to $40 with a D2 steel, but they're nice little liner locks with a nice design, some good rounding. A lot of people are find them very appealing. The CJRB that's most appealing to me is this guy. This is the Centros, and this is a liner lock, meaning you've got this little liner over here that prevents the blade from shutting until you move it over to the side, and then you can shut the knife. And it's running on bearings here. It's using D2 steel, which is a solid steel for a budget kind of knife, and it works great. It's got a nice blade shape here. It's got a nice design to it. It feels like it is really designed, and it's good ergonomically. I like the Centros a lot, and it's definitely my favorite CJRB, I think. Although the Ria could probably make a run for the money, but this guy comes in someplace between $40 and $60, depending on the materials that you're looking to do. So the Centros is one to consider. Next up is the CRKT Pilar. So CRKT, a cricket, I'm probably going to call them, Columbia River Knife and Tool, is a company that does a lot of work through a diversity of price ranges. They do a lot of stuff on the low end and a lot of stuff on the high end. This is one of their big hits on the lower end. This is the Pilar, and it is designed by a very well-known designer, Voxney's, and they've done some good work here because they've got very good ergonomics on this guy. It just feels nice in the hand, and it feels like a higher quality piece than it actually is price-wise, because this guy comes in someplace in the area of $30 to $50, depending on the various models. And there are many models of this. You can get different scales, you can get different steels, you can get different. There are a lot of variants of the Pilar here, but this one particularly, this is sort of the budget basic one. Although it's worth noting that I've resharpened it here to give it a little bit wider, thinner edge. But anyways, the Pilar is a really nice piece, and it is the first frame lock in our set, meaning that there is a part of the frame that is milled out here that goes in the middle that you have to put over to the side there to unlock the knife. But anyways, the Pilar is definitely a good choice on the budget end of things. Next up is the, again, not pictured on the table here, but the Civivi Elementum. Civivi is a company that does a lot of really nice budget style work, right? This is the budget wing of We Knives, which is a Chinese company that is, they do really nice stuff. This right here is the Civivi Praxis. There's also the Backlash. This guy's about $40, and just has this awesome action, as well as fit and finish that is, frankly, a little bit nicer than you would expect for a $40 knife. These are really, really nice. But the Elementum is another great piece, and one of the great things about the Elementum is there were a lot of variants of it, right? You can get upgraded ones. You can go up to S35 yen, which is a very nice blade steel, for about $80, but you can do $50 exactly for the Elementum with a nice action, nice blade, lots of options. Civivi actually has a bunch of things. You also get things like the Shredder over here, the Chronic, oh, come on, I forget the other name of it. It's a front flipper variety. But anyway, Civivi's got a lot of nice stuff out there, and you should definitely check these out. But my personal favorites in there are going to be probably the Elementum as well as the Praxis here, which is, again, one of the bigger pieces. And by the way, look at the edge here. It's such a nice thin edge. I believe, I forget the steel on this guy, but I think it's 14C28N and maybe 9CR. Either way, it's a fine steel for everyday life. And you know what? This is a solid piece for 40 bucks. So there you go. Next thing, my very, very favorite budget pocket knives, and frankly, among my favorite knives generally, are the Ontario Rat number 1 and Rat 2. This is the Rat number 2 here, which is the smaller size, which doesn't make any intuitive sense, but this is a great piece, and in fact, it's a knife good enough that it belonged in my best pocket knives generally piece, because it has a bunch of things going for it. These are the models in D2 steel, and you probably want that. Unless you live in a very rust-prone area, or you really like sharpening a lot, I would recommend going with the D2 models over the OS 8 steel. But what these have are a great action. They're super flicky, super nice, super smooth, a nice, compelling ergonomics on it, and a blade that is amazing, with some belly here with a nice point and some flat area at the bottom, and a super thin edge out of, again, D2 steel, which is going to be absolutely great. So you can get the Ontario Rat number 2 here, or its big brother, the Rat number 1. Both of these guys are coming in, 30 to 50 bucks, depending, because you can get like a fake carbon fiber or something on the top there. You can get a bunch of stuff on there. But nonetheless, the Rat series are amazing, and they're generally where I send people first and foremost for budget sorts of knives. The other place that I send a lot of people is for the super budget end, Opinel. If you're thinking to yourself, oh my God, Nick, 30 bucks, 40 bucks, 50 bucks, are you crazy? How would you pay that for a knife? This might be more your speed. The Opinels are a series of knives. They are a series of knives, and it's a French company. And so they are, and they're classics. And they're classics, and they're very traditional. This is not a knife that somebody will ever look at you funny for pulling out in the middle of a lunchroom, right? It's a nice little wood handle, and wood, of course, tames the fearful in the knife world, but it is a locking knife because you can use this little collar here to lock the knife. And by the way, all of these guys were liner locks up to this point, but this is using the Opinel's locking system, where right now, with this in place, I can't actually close the blade at all. And similarly, if you put this in place, can't open the blade either. So it's a nice dual side locking thing. But anyways, these guys are very, very nice. And you have a variety of sizes. You can do the number 6, which is a smaller version. This is the number 8. Actually, both of these are the Opinel number 8, which I think for a lot of people is kind of the right size. It is about 8 centimeters, a little bit more than that, but still. But you can get the 6 is going to be great for a pocket carry piece, etc. Everything under the Opinel number 5, smaller than that, is a non-locking knife, which actually gives you a nice option for slip joints. But the most important thing about the Opinels is their price point. These guys come in around 15 bucks. You can get them like 13, 14, 15, depending on the size of them. But these are really, really inexpensive knives. And by the way, there are 2 variants you can get. You can get ones with carbon steel, marked here with carbone, as I'm sure I've just mispronounced in French, and then you can get with a stainless steel, which is inox, or I think inoxydable, or something like that. Means it can't oxidize. Anyway, so you can get carbon or stainless steel. Carbon's going to hold the edge a little bit better, but it's also going to be a little bit more vulnerable to rust, so you don't want to put this one to bed wet, so to speak, although you never want to do that to any knife. But they all have super thin, skinny slicing edges. They're really excellent. By the way, on this one, I've modified it a little bit to make it a little easier to open the blade. But nonetheless, Opinels are great, and there's something I recommend all the time, especially to people who really don't want to spend a lot of money, or who want something that is going to be acceptable pretty much everywhere, whereas something like this might scare a little bit more folks, you know? That's a shame, though. Next up is the Real Steel Metamorph. Now, this is, by the way, a special edition sort of thing, a run that was done by Indiana Knives, which is a small retailer here in, well, Indiana, go figure, right? But this has a slightly upgraded blade steel as well as a G10 construction, but you can get the Metamorph for just about 60 bucks for its base model. And this is a knife that has a lot of great things going for it. It has a very nice design. It's an attractive-looking piece, and it is an original design by a reasonably well-known knife designer, Ostap Hell. It has a nice liner lock side of action, and it is a front flipper. Unlike these guys, which have a flipper tab in the back here, the front flipper style knives have a flipper tab up on the top, and so you kind of open it like you flick open a lighter there. And so as a result, this guy ends up, and it has a very, very nice front flip in action. The Metamorph is a knife that a lot of folks love. A lot of folks love a lot. And there were a billion variants of them, and you can get, you know, in any materials at this point. This has been a really popular model, and it's absolutely one that you should be considering as you're going through your life there. So the Real Steel Metamorph is a great design, a great front flipper, and although it's probably the priciest piece on the table here today, it's very much worth considering if you're looking to try the front flipper world. Next up is another company that is a little bit unusual. This is, I'm sorry, the company itself, the name is a little unusual. The rest of it isn't. The company is, they are claiming this is pronounced Rake. I'm probably going to slip and say Ruike because that makes more sense. But it's very important to note that this is not the same thing as Ruike knife, which is Rike, which is a different company entirely. But anyways, Ruike is a company that specializes in making very inexpensive knives and has done some great work. Like this guy right here, this is the P801, and this has it's a frame lock again, so you can see there's a part of the frame of the knife. It's coming over here to lock this up, but it has a very nice little frame here. It has a very nice blade with 14C28N, which is one of the better budget knife steels out there these days. It has a great flipping action. It's very thin in the pocket, very compact. It is a great little knife. The P801 is an excellent piece for $30, and it's definitely something you should be considering. The 108 isn't bad either if you want a very different design, but yeah, so that's this guy. Next up is the Spyderco Tenacious Lightweight. Now, this is a piece that is using 8CR13 MOV. This is a steel that's not amazing these days, but the most important part of this, and the reason that you would consider this, is because this gives you an entry into sort of the Spyderco world. So Spyderco is a very well-known knife brand, particularly on the higher to mid-range end, but this is designed by one of the better designers out there, and given I certainly am a little bit biased towards Sal's designs, but more importantly, this gives you a sense of whether you're going to like the Spyderco approach. It gives you a sense of whether you're going to like the opening hole, and the opening hole has some advantages, meaning it's very easy to just thumb the knife open like that, but you can also do things like flicking it out there with your index finger. You just put your... but anyways, so you can see that. You can see whether you like the ergonomics, whether you like this kind of handle. This is a very good entry-level Spyderco. It's probably not the one you want to stick around with, and you can definitely get better value in terms of materials in other kinds of brands, but at the same time, this is a great way to get a sense of a brand new brand, as well as to get a knife that is pretty excellent in and of its own right. So the Tenacious Lightweight at $45 gives you a taste of one of the better brands in the business, in my experience, and yet still offers you a price point that's pretty reasonable. Then finally, that brings us to the Tangram Knives Vector. Tangram is a sub-brand of Kaiser Cutlery, and this is the only button lock on the table at the moment. A button lock, of course, this is not an automatic knife. An automatic knife would be when you press this button down, the blade fires out. This is not that. Instead, when you open the knife with the thumb stud, the button prevents it from closing. But then if you press the button, the blade can close again. That's all that this is here. And so it's a button lock. It's got a very nice little action. It's a nice little design. It's pretty enough. The Tangram Vector is a knife that I end up recommending a fair amount, especially for somebody who doesn't want to be dealing with, for instance, the fine motive movements of a frame lock or of a liner lock. The button locks do have a lot of advantages in that way. And so anyways, there you go. And then, of course, finally, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Z Hunter ZB138. In fact, it's not so much that I would be remiss, it's that this would probably hunt me down and kill me in my sleep. So, although this is certainly not the best knife for your EDC, it may be the best in my heart, but that's because I've got some sentimentality there. So anyways, these are some very amazing budget choices that you could do. Any one of these could be a great pocket knife for you. Of course, there are improvements to be found over all of these in the higher-end price brackets. None of these knives, I think, really stand up to against the $200-300 range, but of course, it's not expected to. They're under $60, right? And all of these are much, way above the cost to excellence curve, so to speak. They are getting good value. You're doing good things here. And they could serve you well for a very long time. And be careful, they could ignite a strong love for the pocket knife world. So, but nonetheless, there you go. I hope this has been interesting to you. I hope that you find yourself an absolute gem and that you have yourself an absolutely wonderful, no Z Hunter, wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.